The night society remembered began not with music, but with silence, the sort that falls when a truth too sharp has been spoken aloud. Beneath the chandeliers of Lady Harrington's ballroom, where candlelight fractured into gold across polished floors and silk sleeves, Miss Eliza Fairborn stood very still, her gloved hands folded with practiced grace. She had learned, as many women of reduced circumstance did, that composure was a shield more durable than steel. Around her, the tun breathed again, laughter resuming in cautious ripples, yet the words already spoken clung to the air like frost. "I will never love you," the Marquis of Calderwick had said, his voice even, almost courteous, as though declining a dance rather than a woman. He had not raised it. He had not looked away. His restraint, so admired in every other matter, lent the statement its cruelty. Love, he continued, was a foolish ambition, unsuitable for marriages that must secure estates, heirs, and alliances. The remark, intended perhaps as philosophy, landed as judgment. Eliza inclined her head in acknowledgment, for there was nothing else permitted to her, and the Marquis turned from her with the finality of a man closing a ledger. The narrator of any kinder age might pause to insist that Eliza Fairborn was beautiful. In truth, she was something rarer. Her beauty emerged not in first glances but in second thoughts, in the steadiness of her gaze and the quiet intelligence that animated her expressions. She was the daughter of a baronet whose fortune had dwindled under the slow violence of debt and illness, leaving behind a name without the means to support it. Since girlhood, Eliza had learned figures as other women learned flirtation, managing accounts, correspondence, and household economies with an aptitude that saved her family from disgrace. Useful women, however, were seldom cherished. The Marquis of Calderwick was admired precisely because he had never been accused of sentiment. His estate stretched across counties, his lineage unblemished, his conduct irreproachable. He had inherited responsibility early, along with the conviction that personal desire must always bow before public duty. In drawing-rooms, mothers praised his discipline, fathers trusted his word. That evening, many approved his candor, for it reinforced what society preferred to believe, that affection was a luxury, and marriages among the great were transactions best concluded without it. Eliza heard the murmurs as she withdrew, each whisper arranging her into a cautionary tale. Presumptuous, some said, to imagine the Marquis might forget his rank. Others suggested she had aimed above herself, mistaking courtesy for encouragement. She did not correct them. Her dignity demanded silence, though her heart, newly wounded, marked the moment with aching clarity. She accepted her shawl, thanked her hostess with impeccable politeness, and stepped into the cool night air, where the sounds of London seemed suddenly distant. The carriage bore her away through streets slick with recent rain, lamps blurring into trembling halos. Eliza stared ahead, replaying the scene with relentless precision, yet she refused herself tears. She had been dismissed, yes, but she had also been enlightened. The Marquis's declaration stripped away uncertainty, leaving her with the stark knowledge of where she stood in the world. If marriage must be a matter of survival, then she would survive on her own terms. Unbeknownst to her, Calderwick lingered longer than propriety required. He watched the doorway through which she had vanished, telling himself that his words had been necessary, even kind. Better a clean refusal than the false hope bred by indulgence. And yet, beneath the certainty he cultivated, something unsettled stirred. He had expected relief. Instead, he felt only an unaccountable weight, as though he had sealed away something valuable and felt its absence at once. Within days, the story hardened into consensus. Eliza Fairborn departed London for the countryside, ostensibly to tend to her father's health. Invitations ceased. Interest waned. Society, having consumed its moment of drama, turned eagerly toward fresher spectacles. Calderwick resumed his place at the center of affairs, arranging meetings, negotiating leases, fulfilling each obligation with flawless attention. Still, in quiet moments, he recalled the steadiness with which Eliza had received his verdict, and the memory troubled him more than he wished to admit. Thus the matter appeared concluded, neatly filed under accepted truths. Yet endings declared too soon often disguise beginnings in their shadow. Eliza traveled north with resolve hardening in her chest, determined to reshape her future beyond the reach of careless words. Calderwick remained amid glittering rooms and dutiful praise, unaware that the choice he believed settled had merely been postponed. In the space between them, unspoken and unacknowledged, the conflict took root, waiting for the hour when restraint would no longer suffice. Eliza Fairborn arrived at her father's diminished estate with the calm of a woman who had already endured worse than solitude. The house, once animated by guests and ambition, now breathed quietly, its rooms ordered by necessity rather than display. She resumed her former labors without ceremony, balancing accounts, negotiating rents, and answering letters that required tact more than ink. Purpose steadied her, yet memory persisted, and the Marquis's voice lingered like a distant bell she could neither silence nor answer. The country offered fewer mirrors, fewer judges, and in that gentler obscurity Eliza's composure deepened into resolve. Her father relied upon her judgment with unspoken gratitude, and neighbors soon learned that Miss Fairborn possessed a mind equal to any steward's. Respect, when earned honestly, restored something pride alone could not. Still, the realities of inheritance pressed close. Without fortune or marriage, her usefulness would one day fail to protect her. It was during this season of quiet diligence that Mr. Thomas Ashwick entered her life, not dramatically, but with steady inevitability. He was a member of Parliament for a nearby borough, widowed young, practical in habit and plain in manner. His visits were courteous, his interest transparent, and his admiration rooted in Eliza's competence rather than her charm. He spoke of security, of partnership, of a household governed sensibly. Love was not mentioned, yet neither was it denied. Eliza listened with care, weighing each word as she weighed coin, mindful that affection, like currency, could not be spent twice. While she considered her future, Calderwick observed from a distance he pretended was accidental. Reports reached him through agents and acquaintances, improvements made, debts reduced, order restored. He told himself that his attention was administrative, born of responsibility for neighboring lands. And yet, when he learned she prospered without him, relief eluded him. Instead, he sent assistance anonymously, arranging favorable terms, returning a misplaced heirloom through intermediaries, gestures cloaked in discretion. He called it protection. He refused to name it anything else. The countryside, however, possesses its own vigilant eyes. When Eliza attended a midsummer assembly, accompanied by Mr. Ashwick, conversation followed them like a draught. Their civility suggested intention. Calderwick, arriving unexpectedly on estate business, witnessed the scene with a shock that unsettled his practiced restraint. She looked composed, capable, and irrevocably changed. For the first time, he confronted the possibility that her life might proceed entirely beyond his influence. Fate, indifferent to dignity, contrived a smaller trial. A sudden storm interrupted the evening, forcing guests to seek shelter hastily. Eliza and Calderwick found themselves briefly alone beneath a stone portico, rain drumming insistently between them. Their exchange was minimal, each word measured, yet the proximity itself invited interpretation. By morning, the incident had transformed into speculation, a harmless moment sharpened into implication. Calderwick withdrew at once, aware that his presence endangered her reputation more than his absence ever had. Eliza, discerning the limits of patience, accepted Mr. Ashwick's proposal shortly thereafter. Her answer was calm, deliberate, and final. Security was promised, respect assured. When news reached Calderwick, he read it twice, then a third time, as though repetition might dull its force. Instead, it clarified what denial had obscured. The choice he had refused to make was no longer his alone, and the certainty he prized revealed itself as a fragile, costly illusion. He walked the length of his study that night, pausing before maps and ledgers that had never before defied him, and found no guidance there. Memory returned with unwelcome clarity. Eliza's steady voice, her refusal to plead, the economy of her gestures. He recognized, too late, that her acceptance of another had been shaped by the very principles he prized. In protecting his rank, he had taught her how to survive without him. The realization did not inspire action, only a sharpened unease, as though time itself had begun to watch him. Eliza, meanwhile, prepared for a future chosen without illusion. She set aside small possessions, distributed responsibilities, and wrote letters that closed one chapter while opening another. Mr. Ashwick treated her with scrupulous respect, never pressing where affection did not yet exist, and she honored his restraint with honesty. Yet in moments of solitude, she acknowledged a lingering sorrow, not for what had been lost, but for what had never been permitted to begin. She did not regret her decision, though she wondered whether certainty was merely another form of endurance. As autumn advanced, preparations progressed with measured efficiency. Dates were discussed, settlements drafted, expectations aligned. Calderwick's name surfaced only indirectly, attached to matters of land and obligation, yet it hovered unspoken between her lines. The world appeared settled, but beneath its calm, something strained toward reckoning. Choices made in silence, the narrator observes, have a way of demanding witness, and the season turned with the promise that this story, thought concluded, had not yet spoken its most necessary words. Calderwick resolved to delay nothing further, yet habit restrained him, and days passed beneath the weight of unsent letters. Each morning confirmed that order endured without him, each evening reminded him that order alone could not quiet regret. He considered the cost of intervention, the ridicule of peers, the disruption of arrangements already sanctioned by law and custom. Still, beneath calculation, a simpler truth pressed. To remain silent was to consent to a future he would forever measure against absence. Somewhere beyond his windows, Eliza prepared to bind her life to another with clear eyes and steady hands. The knowledge sharpened time, converting patience into peril. When at last he sealed a letter, brief and unadorned, requesting a private audience before vows were spoken, he did not call it hope. He called it necessity, unaware that necessity, once acknowledged, rarely remains obedient. It was a decision that unsettled him more than any treaty or title, for it admitted that dignity could be defended only by risking it, and that restraint, once absolute, had begun to fracture under the quiet insistence of consequence and choice. Eliza received the Marquis's letter at dawn, when the house lay hushed and resolve felt fragile. She read the measured request twice, noting its restraint, its refusal to presume, its insistence on necessity. A private audience, it said, before arrangements were concluded. She folded the paper without haste, knowing how easily silence might answer it. Yet propriety allowed the meeting, and courage required it. She agreed, stipulating witnesses nearby, the hour brief, and intentions stated plainly. Acceptance steadied her breathing, though memory stirred, unwelcome and alive. The choice honored her dignity while guarding the future she now claimed alone firmly. They met in the estate's small withdrawing room, curtains drawn against curiosity, a maid stationed discreetly beyond the door. Calderwick entered with careful composure, bowing precisely, his expression governed yet strained. He spoke first, not of love, but of error, confessing that his certainty had proven incomplete. He praised Eliza's prudence, her strength, her refusal to trade dignity for favor. Each word acknowledged her worth without asking for forgiveness. She listened, attentive and reserved, measuring sincerity by what he dared not say aloud. Silence pressed gently, inviting truth while protecting both from haste. She waited, composed, patient, and observant still. Calderwick continued, voice low, describing obligations learned early, affection disciplined into usefulness, desire postponed indefinitely. He admitted fear of choosing wrongly, of failing ancestors and tenants alike, of becoming reckless under feeling's influence. Eliza answered calmly, refusing pity and rejecting rescue, stating that security without regard became another form of poverty. She reminded him she had survived absence, and would not exchange independence for belated tenderness. Her clarity unsettled him more than accusation, for it named equality as the price of return. For once, his rank offered no shelter from consequence or choice. The room held its breath. Briefly then, he approached the window, restraining impulse, and spoke of the coming wedding with deliberate respect. He did not ask her to break faith, nor did he contest her decision's honor. Instead, he offered a confession withheld too long, that admiration had grown into attachment despite denial. He did not name love, yet the omission resounded. Eliza felt the weight of his words settle, neither absolving nor condemning him. She acknowledged the courage it required, and asked whether courage would endure public consequence. The question sharpened the air, demanding more than apology or restraint. He turned back slowly. "Eyes steady now." Calderwick replied that consequence must be met openly, or meaning dissolved into caution. He spoke of ridicule, of displeasing kin, of unsettling settlements already drawn. None of it, he admitted, frightened him as much as continuing without her regard. Eliza studied him closely, recognizing effort rather than eloquence. She said she would not be persuaded by promise alone, nor by regret sharpened by rivalry. If he wished to speak further, it must be without witness and without evasion. The condition was measured, protecting her dignity while testing his resolve. He accepted at once, surprising them both. Silence followed, briefly. Unbroken. Time pressed upon them, yet the meeting drew toward its end with quiet gravity. Eliza rose first, signaling boundaries honored, and Calderwick mirrored her restraint. No vows were altered, no plans dismantled, yet something essential had shifted. He requested leave to write again, plainly and privately, before the final day. She consented, neither hopeful nor closed, mindful that truth required space to prove itself. As he departed, she felt steadier, knowing her worth had been spoken aloud. The room seemed larger, emptied of tension yet heavy with implication. She breathed deeply, steadying resolve. Outside, wheels turned softly. Afternoon light faded. Calderwick walked into the corridor with unfamiliar humility, carrying words unspent and purpose newly sharpened. Habit urged retreat, but conscience pressed forward. He drafted the letter that night with precision stripped of defense, acknowledging love at last without ornament. He asked for nothing she could not freely give, offering instead equality before society's gaze. When he sealed it, he understood risk as clarity rather than danger. The act did not promise success, yet it restored integrity he had misplaced. For the first time, duty aligned imperfectly with desire. Sleep came late, thoughts disciplined but restless. Morning would judge him. Soon. Eliza spent the evening arranging papers and listening to the house settle around her. She did not rehearse answers, trusting judgment shaped by trial. The proposal she had accepted promised steadiness, yet steadiness alone could not answer every question. Calderwick's confession did not unmake her decision, but it demanded consideration. She resolved to read his letter without haste, to weigh words against action. Choice, she knew, required courage equal to refusal, and she possessed it. Still, memory lingered, quiet but insistent, refusing erasure. She welcomed sleep cautiously, uncertain yet composed. The future waited, attentive, unyielding. It would soon speak. Clearly. Days narrowed toward the appointed date, each marked by decorum and expectation. The letter arrived as promised, direct and unadorned, bearing responsibility without demand. Eliza read it once, then again, noting how action accompanied every claim. He pledged public acknowledgement, not secrecy, and patience for her answer. She set the letter aside, heart steady, mind alert. Whatever she chose would be chosen freely, without rescue or retreat. The knowledge steadied her steps as preparations continued. The household sensed change, speaking softly, watching her closely. She welcomed scrutiny, having nothing to conceal. Decision gathered weight quietly. Time shortened perceptibly. All waited. Thus the interval closed with restraint intact yet trembling, poised between promise and precedent. Eliza stood ready to choose with eyes open, while Calderwick prepared to stand publicly accountable. Neither sought victory, only alignment between conscience and conduct. Society's machinery continued, indifferent yet vulnerable to courage. What remained uncertain was not feeling, now spoken, but whether action would arrive before bells claimed their hour. In that narrowing space, possibility endured, delicate and exacting, awaiting the moment when silence would finally yield. The choice approached, inevitable, demanding witness from both hearts. Morning hovered, breath held, unresolved. Everything depended on courage. Next. Morning arrived with measured solemnity, bells distant and undecided, as though the day itself hesitated. Eliza rose before the household stirred, dressing without ornament, her movements calm and exact. She felt no trembling, only clarity sharpened by choice. When she descended, word came that the Marquis had arrived, requesting to speak before the hour advanced. She did not ask who permitted it, understanding that some moments authorize themselves. She met him in the small garden room, where pale light revealed neither advantage nor concealment. Calderwick did not kneel, nor did he plead. He stood as he would before Parliament or court, composed yet exposed. He spoke briefly, stating that he had come to accept whatever answer she gave, and to offer publicly what he had once withheld. He acknowledged the arrangements made, the honor owed another man, and the cost of interruption. Then he said her name as though it were both address and vow. The simplicity of it disarmed ceremony. Eliza listened, attentive, measuring the space between courage and impulse. She replied without haste, stating that she would not be claimed by spectacle or urgency. If he wished to stand beside her, it would be as an equal, accountable before society and himself. She asked whether he would speak as plainly before witnesses as he now spoke to her. Calderwick answered that he would, knowing dignity required daylight. The answer settled something long suspended. Eliza nodded once, neither yielding nor triumphant, and asked him to wait while she addressed the household and the arrangements already formed. The hour unfolded deliberately. Eliza met Mr. Ashwick with unflinching honesty, thanking him for respect freely given and refusing to trade it for pretense. He received her words with disappointment tempered by integrity, acknowledging that affection demanded more than security. Their separation was quiet, witnessed only by conscience, yet it carried the gravity of vows declined honorably. Eliza returned to the garden room with composure intact, aware that courage exacted cost without cruelty. Calderwick rose as she entered, reading the decision in her steadiness before she spoke. They proceeded together, not in haste, toward the assembled company awaiting the ceremony. Whispers surged, then stilled, as Calderwick addressed the room. He spoke of duty first, of stewardship and lineage, acknowledging expectations publicly borne. Then he spoke of error, naming his refusal of feeling as fear rather than wisdom. He declared his intention to marry Eliza Fairborn with full acknowledgement of consequence, valuing her judgment as his equal and her consent as sovereign. The words, measured and unmistakable, altered the room's balance. Silence followed, heavy yet attentive. Eliza stepped forward then, refusing rescue, asserting choice. She accepted his declaration only as partnership freely entered, stating that dignity had guided her every decision. Her voice carried without strain, reaching even those inclined to doubt. The exchange transformed observation into witness. Society, confronted with resolve rather than spectacle, adjusted reluctantly. There were murmurs, objections anticipated, yet none voiced openly. Authority, once challenged honestly, often falters. Calderwick offered his arm, not commandingly, but in invitation. Eliza accepted, sealing the choice without display. The ceremony that followed was spare, stripped of indulgence, yet exact in form. Vows spoken were neither florid nor timid, promising fidelity grounded in respect. When rings were exchanged, no applause followed, only the recognition of something settled by conscience rather than custom. Outside, bells rang at last, decisive now, as though time had resolved its hesitation. The gathering dispersed slowly, measuring the change, absorbing its implication. Calderwick and Eliza departed together, unhurried, aware that beginning required patience as much as courage. In the days that followed, society adjusted its language, curiosity cooling into acceptance. Calderwick fulfilled obligations with renewed transparency, inviting scrutiny rather than evading it. Eliza assumed her place beside him without relinquishing autonomy, engaging estate affairs with familiar competence. Their conversations were deliberate, shaped by listening as much as assertion. Affection unfolded without haste, enriched by restraint endured and respect earned. They did not claim triumph, only alignment. The household noted the difference, sensing harmony rooted not in dominance, but in accord. Years later, the narrator observes, their story would be recalled without embellishment, notable not for defiance but for clarity. It demonstrated that love, when admitted honestly, need not undermine duty, but refine it. Eliza Fairborn did not rise by rescue, nor did Calderwick descend by concession. They met where conscience permitted, and from that meeting, order emerged reshaped. The world continued, estates endured, and expectations shifted by degree rather than decree. Yet within those measured changes, something lasting took hold. On an evening much like the first that tested them, they stood together beneath softened light, listening to rain against glass. Calderwick spoke of gratitude without possessiveness, Eliza answered with warmth unshadowed by caution. Their union bore the marks of choice rather than compulsion, and in that distinction lay its strength. The century would remain severe, its judgments slow to yield, but within its bounds, they had claimed a freedom exacted honestly. The final truth required no ornament. Dignity, once honored, makes room for love to endure.